All forms of presentations start with intro. However, when you are asked to give a presentation to an audience from a different culture, there are intercultural factors that can hinder the success of your presentation. From the point of view of the methodology of adult learning, andragogy, intro is a key element of the presentation. Adults, to learn, need purpose, so what is the meaning of my participation? Reason, what will I get from being here? And structure, what will happen in turn when there are breaks to which the presentation will take place. Intro your presentation across cultures. My name is Kamila Ludwikowska. I'm cross-cultural trainer and coach, and in this video I will present you the structure of intro for your presentation with cross-cultural context. Intro consists of 5 elements: interest, needs, topic, range, and objectives. Let's start with interest. The main goal of the introduction is the participants' interest and focus on the subject of the presentation. The best admission is when participants will think in their heads, that is a good start. I wonder what will happen next. So start with something original, amaze your audience, and be enthusiastic. To this end, it is worth using so-called hooks for attention and icebreakers. A hook for attention, that is something like a promise that later it will be interesting. It may be a task, it may be a question, a sense of what is coming. Icebreaker, that is the short form of exercise that will break the formal atmosphere and bring the participants closer together. Depends on the objective. So think of something that you can do at the beginning of your presentation. I will give you a few examples. A little known fact. That is very good because it's a well-placed fact, brings credibility to a talk. You need to remember to make the fact as relevant to the audience as possible. For example, statistic can be a great attention grabber. Did you know that you are most likely to be killed by a falling coconut than by a shark? Keep it simple. If you want something that captures the imagination of your audience, maybe tell a story. We grow through stories and we spend the entire life telling stories about our day and listening to other people's stories. Stories are memorable, stories are impactful, stories create a quick human connection with your audience. Stories work because they illustrate your message. Don't worry about being clever. You can find story everywhere. You can ask me where exactly I can find my story. So I will answer in your everyday life. Collect them. Note down everything meaningful that happens in your life. You can also create an interest by evoking an image. You can say, imagine if you will, and then you will ask people to picture something in their mind. You can also use a provocative question. It really gets us thinking. For example, how do you explain why some people are able to achieve things that seem impossible? The reaction of your audience might be, oh, I never thought about asking that. How we can start a good provocative question. Why is it that? How can we? What is it about that makes it so special, fascinating, successful? What's the future of? Do something unique. Another way how you can interest your audience at the beginning. Unique, difficult to categorize. Make a splash, add a bit of role play, a noise of some instrument, or maybe silence. It works really very good, but of course you need to have a bit of confidence. Another way is to interact with your audience. Get your audience on your side. Keep your interaction positive and use it to get yes from your audience. For example, I have a confession to make, but first, I want you to make a little confession to me. I want you to raise your hand if you have ever experienced relatively little stress. Anyone? The rule here is that you are raising your hand first. Some different ways to interact with your audience. Hands up if you, or you can take a volunteer from your audience. You can quiz your audience and see who gets the right answer. You can use a rhetorical question. You can get your audience to do something physical also, like speak about the person next to you, stand up and do some activity, write something down, etc. Another way to create interest, compliment your audience. One effective way to get an audience on your side is to compliment them. For example, it's an honor to be speaking with you today. You are the top sellers in the real estate in the city, and I'm thrilled to present to this high achieving group. One more thing is using you. Just like you, I was brought up to believe. You know what it's like when. If I were to ask you, now why word you? Word you is a key way to make your presentation about your audience, not about you. So you also need properly orient talk to the needs and knowledge of your audience, but not yours. And finally, sprinkle some local flavor. Mention something that demonstrates that you have some familiarity with the area. You might say something about the local sport team, a coffee shop, a restaurant that you stopped at, a local news story you heard that morning, or popular event that's being held. Anything. So that was about the first component, interest. The second one, needs. One of the main reasons why people don't engage with the presentation is that they don't always clearly understand why they are there. So ensure you describe an issue or the reasons why people need the information you are going to give them. Prove the auditorium why it's worth listening to you. Refer to the needs and motivations of your listeners. Why does your audience need to hear your presentation? Why does your audience need to be there? What are the reasons why you have decided to do the presentation? These are the questions that you should answer on. The need corresponds to the benefit of the participation in the presentation. So participants need to know what knowledge they need to get out of the room. It is worth referring here not only to the professional sphere, but also to the private of participants. The next component is topic. Relate the topic with the facts from reality that will be close to the audience listening to you. So the subject of the presentation should be as short as possible, understandable, adequate, original. You can also give your presentation a catchy title. The next component is range. Specify the scope of your occurrence. Thematic scope, and therefore the presentation program with a specific meeting agenda, so that everyone knows how much he needs to sit in order to be able to go somewhere, for example. This seems banal, but the needs of a lower order, including physiological, will always prevail over the needs of a higher order. So it is worth taking care of participants' comfort and informing them about breaks, about lunchtime, and so on. Also, outline what you are and what you are not going to cover in your presentation. This saves people sitting and waiting or interrupting you to ask questions that you are going to answer later. Objectives. Present the goals you have set yourself. Time asking questions. So, what points are you trying to get across? What will people know by the end of your presentation? Help people to see what they will know and what they will understand, what they will able to do after they have received your information. So these were 5 elements of intro, but intro elements are sensitive according to different cultures. Before you will decide on the interest element, consider following aspects. For example, level of context. Low context cultures, such as Germany, Switzerland, or even the United States, expect verbal messages to be explicit and direct. High context cultures, such as Japan and Brazil, expect less emphasis on words, so they will appreciate, for example, evoking images or stories. Be careful with using humor. Humor is very contextual, and in cross-cultural communication, your attempt at humor may be lost in translation, or even worse, it could be even taken offensively. Very hierarchical and formal cultures may see them as unprofessional. In such high power distance countries, Acknowledge a leader's status. Be aware that you may need to go to the top of the answer. For example, China and Saudi Arabia. These are hierarchical countries with a high power distance index. The next, indulgence versus restraint. For high indulgence cultures, freedom of speech is important. Don't take life too seriously. Allow yourself, for example, for evoking image or telling a story. In high restraint cultures, avoid making jokes when engaging in formal session. Instead of that, be professional. If you plan interactive icebreaker during creating the interest, so consider if your audience is from individualistic or collectivistic culture. The way how you will engage them will influence their involvement. The United States is considered, for example, as one of the most individualistic countries in the world. When you will speak about benefits during intro, so consider different elements such as long and short-term orientation of your audience. A long-term oriented cultures, for example, Asian countries such as China, Japan, fosters virtues directed towards the future. A short-term oriented cultures like Morocco fosters virtues related to the past and the present, so they will prefer outcomes coming quickly. Consider also the level of avoiding uncertainty. Individuals from a strong uncertainty avoidance culture background, for example, Greece or South American countries such as Chile, Peru, or Argentina, they may feel a strong need for a definite prognosis, timeline, and outcomes expectations. And also be clear and concise about expectations and goals and be clearly set the goals to the parameters. Individuals from a weak uncertainty avoidance cultures, like Singapore, they may feel comfortable with the unknown and have less need for a definitive prognosis. To remain focused, they don't need too much structure. Also, while talking about objective, so consider, for example, masculinity versus femininity. In high masculine countries like Japan, people are motivated by precise targets and by being able to show that they achieved them either as a group or as individuals. So for them, articulate goals precisely. Whereas highly feminine countries like Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, they will appreciate when collaboration and input come from all levels. So, just as with any audience from your culture, the details will vary and each situation will be different where presenting across cultures. But by taking the time to understand the culture of your audience, you will deliver a better presentation with better outcomes for you and your audience. So be creative and good luck in preparing intro for your next presentation.